From the Denver Broncos Media Center, welcome to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
I want to get to the A.J. Bouye thing here because today the Broncos released him.
Yeah, we talked about this last night.
This is something that we've obviously talked about quite a bit on the show. You tweeted out, and I think this is kind of where the next points go to, about what's next here, because it seems like Jarrell Casey is going to be one of the next names. We've talked about Von Miller and what that represents. And there are some other contracts here that, I mean, you could go into the Nick Van Etz.
Jeff Driscoll.
Yeah, Jeff Driscoll, of course, is another one. You get some major savings there, too. So what do you sort of expect is going to be the next thing to happen here?
I think the next thing is probably the Jarrell Casey situation getting resolved one way or the other, and it's probably cutting bait with him. And they'll do that if they feel they've got the Shelby thing settled. You know, they can negotiate with Shelby Harris right now. They can get that done, and they've put out an offer to him. I think they're going to get that done. They put an offer to him a while back. They've been kind of sitting on that. I think they got that done. They'll be fine. The key or the question or the thing really is once they've got that bird in the hand, then you pivot back to Justin Simmons, who you can't actually negotiate with until the first of the league year. And the way to ensure that he doesn't actually get to free agency is you tag him again, which he's going to be upset with. But George Paton needs to call him and say, hey, look, this is just a negotiating ploy. We're trying to get to, X, Y, and Z. If it doesn't work, we'll rescind the tag or whatever.
And he's got a great relationship with players. He's shown that in the past. And I think that right. You're onto something there, because I think if it's John Elway, and this is no direct offense to John Elway, but if it's John Elway doing that, I think it would rub the player the wrong way. They would feel as though it's a bit of a slight, even though it's clearly an indication the Broncos want to keep him. That negotiation tactic has not always worked here in Denver with John Elway, because he's always trying to win the negotiation. George Paton, on the other hand, has built these relationships with players, and I think that's sort of the expectation then, is that George Paton would reach out to Justin, who, by the way, has already done that. He's already tried to smooth things out. Hey, I understand you're probably worried about this. You've spoken very positively about him in the media. You went and talked to him on the phone. So I'm feeling very confident Justin Simmons is going to be a Bronco for a really long time. But back to A.J. Bouye for a little bit. I saw Andrew Mason put this up as a poll, and I thought this was kind of a good point, because A.J. Bouye did not give you what you were hoping to get out of him this year. Like, there's no way to cut it to say that A.J. Bouye lifted the secondary to a level that you needed him to be able to do. I mean, he was hurt for a good portion of the year, and then he got suspended. But the question he asked is, was it still a good move? Was it still good? They traded a fourth rounder to get him. Was it still a good move? I say it still was. I liked the gamble there, especially because what you ended up getting back was a contract that didn't have any dead cap hit for you. So you knew you could move on as soon as the very next year. And so I liked the gamble. It didn't quite work out. Maybe there's something to learn from it. You're still going to have to probably go into free agency and get a cornerback. You're going to have to add at least another cornerback or two in the draft. But I didn't necessarily come away from this experience with A.J. Bouye thinking, man, what a missed moment that was for this organization.
Yeah, I think sometimes you roll the dice and win, sometimes you don't. And that was one of those ones where they made the right move. That trade was the right move. It just didn't pan out, and sometimes you use result to justify the process. You'll find people doing that, at other stations around town, and it's, of course, ridiculous, but, that's what they do. And it's not, if you look at it through that lens, then you're going to say, oh, this was terrible. But the reality was, at the time, you needed a corner. You needed a guy who played on the outside. And when he was in there, he played well. It wasn't like he was getting roasted or anything.
I'm not saying it was bad. I'm just saying
he played well. It didn't work because he was hurt. Because of hurt and suspension.
Yes.
And so, injury and suspension. And it was a season where a whole lot of guys were hurt. So, that sucks for Bouye. And I know that he was liked in that locker room. I know they liked him a lot. It sucks for him. But, in the end, it didn't work out. And they're going to try and find somebody that they feel like is a little bit better fit and probably more cost controlled.
And he's still a young player. I mean, he's still got many years ahead of him.
Yeah, he's still got time left.
He's got the right mentality. I mean, you and I talked to him this offseason when the Broncos brought him in. He talked to the media, and then we also brought him on Broncos Country Tonight. And, I mean, this is a guy that's just played his entire career with a chip on his shoulders, undrafted player. And he wanted to prove things. When he left Houston, he went to Jacksonville. He played really well when that team was really good around him, when he had a really good secondary and a cornerback on the opposite side. He had great safeties. I mean, they just had a really, really talent-rich defense for a couple of years there. But when it started to fall off, when he was asked to be cornerback one, he struggled. out in Jacksonville. Now, we said this when they acquired him, said, okay, well, it's possible that A.J. Bouye will never, ever get back to the level of what he was playing at there at the end of the Texans' time and then with Jacksonville. But I like the gamble. The one thing you'd have to watch out for is if he's expected to be CB1, may not be a good deal for him. Mm-hmm. There were times he was expected to be CB1, and it didn't always work out. But I thought as a compliment to Bryce Callahan, when those two were both out there, I thought they did pretty well.
Yeah, the defense played well when both those two were out there. And I thought when he was on the field, it was worth it. But, ultimately he wasn't on the field enough to justify it. The PED thing, even with the fact that, he was misled, and there's a lawsuit with all that and everything. In the end, you just didn't get the bang for the buck. And, I think George Payton and them are looking at this and saying, look, we got to re-sign Shelby. We got to re-sign Justin. We got to figure out the Von Miller situation. We got to tender 3 guys. I can do more with this money than a guy we're not sure about.
Do you take the decision to do it now as we already maybe have some eyes on cornerbacks that are going to be out there, or do you think it's more just this was an easy decision to just go ahead and wipe off the books?
I think it's both. I think it's a combination of when he knew this was coming. You're doing right by the player and getting him out ahead of the market so that he can begin working his negotiation on the market. And then I think the other part of this is you understand and have allocated that money towards another player. And that's where you're going with that. Just getting that cleared up and showing your players where the money, hey, look, we're freeing this up. We're going to make this work. Bear with me. And I think that's where it's at.
Coming up next on Broncos Country Tonight, we're going to take a look at free agent cornerbacks. Where should the Broncos be looking to invest? Where do they target? We'll get to it next.
Welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
Which position is the must add for the Broncos during NFL free agency? All right, is it cornerback, inside linebacker, or quarterback? Ben, what did you vote for on this poll?
I voted for corner. I feel like that's the bigger need. I feel like if there's anything that you need to go out there and address and you'd want to spend free agent money on, it would be the corner position. I wouldn't want to spend up an inside linebacker. We talk about Matt Milano. Do you really want to spend $10 million on an inside backer, especially when you're going to spend at least 3 on Alexander Johnson?
I mean, if Vic Fangio tells me he's the inside linebacker he needs.
I got Vic Fangio in here as a coach because I want to see what he can do with younger, less expensive talent.
Okay.
So for me, that's, he's there to coach up the talent, and I think that's where we want to skimp.
Okay, so if we're going into free agency looking for cornerbacks, a couple of the ones that come up to mind, of course, we know Patrick Peterson is going to be available. We also know that Desmond King is a free agent. Shaquille Griffin is a free agent cornerback. Chidobe Awuzie, we know him from CU, but he's been with Dallas. William Jackson III out of Cincy is another cornerback. Richard Sherman, believe it or not, is a free agent. Those are some of the top cornerbacks. So which of those cornerbacks do you prefer?
Well, I don't want Sherman. He's a cover 3 corner. I don't think he's really a fit. Let's go back through that list and work our way back down. We'll go yes or no, and then we'll go from there.
You're going to make me do this, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. The Sherman's one that's going to be overpriced for what you're getting. And at this point in his career, he's kind of a liability, especially in man. So,
all right, so back through this, taking off Sherman, William Jackson III out of Cincy.
I'm okay with that one. That's one I'm okay with.
Chidobe Awuzie.
There's the Colorado connection. I think people might like that, but reality, I don't know.
Okay. Keep going here. Mention Patrick Peterson. You are actually pretty okay with that one?
I'm okay with that one at the right price. I'm not spending a bunch of money on it. If he wants to come, I mean, he's had some issues the last couple of years in coverage, but he'd be better in this particular setup. I think that if it's me, I'm looking at the cost, and if I can get him at the right price, I'm in on that.
Shaquille Griffin.
No, he's not a fit. And that's one that keeps getting associated here. It's weird to me. He's not a fit. He's a cover 3 corner and a man corner. I don't know why you'd bring him out here.
Desmond King.
Maybe. That's not inspiring to me. I feel like if he's available cheap, yeah, sure.
DJ Hayden.
I'd be okay with that.
Yeah. Ronald Darby.
I'd be okay with that.
We're getting kind of lower here.
Yeah.
Like now we're looking at guys that may or not be
because these are guys that are going to be worth the
starters.
cost, but they're not.
Yes.
Yeah, you're not CB1s, but they're worth the cost in terms of a CB2. Sure.
Yeah. Let's see here. Trey Herndon. Troy Hill.
No.
J.C. Jackson.
No.
Yeah. So I feel like the further we get down that list, the
Yeah, Willie Jackson, though, somebody I'd look at. Uzier, okay.
See, if we're talking about guys that you have to get, I think we have to establish something that you need to get a starting caliber kind of player.
You got to be CB1 or CB2.
Yeah,
I mean, it's what you need.
You have to have that.
Bryce Callahan's your guy, but you got to have a CB1 or CB2. He can be able to cover a wide receiver 1 or 2.
Yes, of course. So if that is the baseline here of you don't want to have to go into the draft and guarantee that you're taking a cornerback early in the draft, you want to be able to take one when you want to. Remember that's part of the whole goal of free agency is not so much to hamstring yourself into, well, this is what we have to come away with in the draft, unless you have the number 1 overall pick, and then it's very obvious that you're coming in to take, in this case, Trevor Lawrence. You're not going to get a quarterback in free agency if you're the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Right.
But otherwise, you want to give yourself options. Mm-hmm. You do not want the rest of the league to know what your intent is going into the draft. And if they don't bring in a cornerback in free agency, then it's very clear what their intent is. They're going to go heavy on corners and secondary. If you're going to rank your top 3 targets as far as position, we can tie names to this. So you give me your top 3 targets in name, in position, and then we'll tie the name to it. So you mentioned corners, you're number 1.
Right. We need some hypotheticals here, though, because I am assuming in this scenario we've re-signed Shelby and Justin and we're keeping Vaughn.
Let's say that.
Okay. Because that changes the edge rusher, because obviously we need an edge rusher in that scenario.
Let's just say things stay status quo,
okay,
more or less.
Corner and inside backer
think
would be 1 and 2. I mean, just right there.
So inside linebacker. But you don't think Matt Milano would be worth now? Because the thing you're clearing a bunch of cap space. I know, and part of that's going to go to Justin. Part of it's going to go to Shelby. Vaughn's already spoken for, at least on your cap right now. You got about $34 million available.
Well, $34 million, but you're going to have on your cap, you got signing bonuses for both those guys, and it's going to be front loaded. And keep in mind, you need about $8 to $9 million to sign your rookie class.
Absolutely.
So you got $30 million. Okay, so now we're down to let's say $9 million, just to be conservative.
But you know what you don't have to do? You don't have to address the offensive line.
True, but I mean, you keep in mind, you got $9 million, you got $10 million in tenders probably coming. And then you've got another $10 million for a rookie class. That's 20 of that money right there. That only leaves you $14 million.
And that's Justin Simmons.
Roughly. Maybe.
Yeah, he's going to be closer to 15.
So this idea that the Broncos, like when you look at the cap and everything else, this idea they're way under and all this kind of stuff. They have other expenses they've got to account for.
But we haven't cleared off Jarrell Casey yet.
Right. That's where the overage on the Justin and then the Shelby money comes in. That's where that happens. And then you probably try to get Vaughn to renegotiate.
Okay, so inside linebacker is your next one.
Right, but you just can't spend $10 million. It's going to cost $10 million to bring in Matt Milano.
Yeah, and Levante David, I don't even know if he's going to be available. I mean, they were talking about Tampa. Yeah, they were talking about that at the parade today. And
I mean, obviously right now he's going to say that, but I really do believe that he's going to end his career. He's one of those, he's like their Von Miller. He's going to end their career there kind of thing.
Broncos could have had him.
Try to.
Broncos could have had him.
They could have.
Heartbreaking. Where's defensive end now for you?
I think, like I've said from the beginning, I think the Broncos need to address all 4 levels of defense. I think you need to get the defensive line. I think you need to get an edge rusher. I think you need an inside backer. I think you need a corner. I think you need a safety. I think all of those are things you need in the draft. It's going to be a very defensive-heavy draft, and I agree. If you don't have Shelby, that becomes a priority. In Vic Fangio's defense, you have to be able to generate pressure from the front 4 or 5. You have to. It starts there. And then the rest of it falls into place. It's not like other defenses where you get corners that can cover on an island and they'll lock a guy down until your defense can get home. That's more the Wade Phillips philosophy, right? In Vic Fangio, it starts up front. It actually does. And, those up front guys make the back end better. And so you need guys that can get home with it. And if they can't get home, then we need to find guys who you got to have a high pass rush win rate.
So if you don't get Shelby Harris, do you swing for the fences on a high end defensive line like they tried to last year? Because you go after like a Leonard Williams.
I think you look for guys that Vic's worked with before, and if he feels comfortable in, then you go ahead and pay for him. And if not, then you go to the draft.
Coming up next on Broncos Country Tonight, we check in with DNVR's Zach Stevens. AJ Bouye is gone. What are they going to do to replace him? We'll get to it next.
Welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
We're going to head out to the hotline as we check in with DNVR. And tonight, it's Zach Stevens at Zach Stevens DNVR on Twitter. It's always great to have you on the show, Zach. Let's talk about AJ Bouye for a minute, and the Broncos decide to move on from him. I don't think this really surprised anybody, but it kind of comes down to what are you going to fill that void? And there is a void there. What are you going to fill that void? So if you had it your way, you're the GM right now, how are you filling the cornerback position for the Broncos?
Well, guys, I think the Broncos have to fill this multiple ways. I don't think with quarterback and cornerback, I don't think they can go into the draft having not addressed either of those positions, or else then they're stuck and they absolutely would be forced to draft one of those guys in the first round pretty much. So I think they're going to have to address both of those positions, quarter and cornerback, in free agency and in the draft. And now in free agency, if it's a bigger move, if it's a bigger name that they bring in terms of money, then they don't have to go first round in the draft. Then you could very well see another third round corner, which I know gets people fired up about third round corners. But if it's more of a smaller name that they address in free agency with the cornerback position, then it could very, very well be Patrick Surtain, Caleb Farley at number 9, or you could see a trade down for the Broncos and maybe move into the late teens, early 20s, and go with the J.C. Horn at cornerback. And right now, guys, I wouldn't be surprised if the move as of right now is to pick up a veteran quarterback to bring in some competition for Drew Lock this year and really have that be the quarterback room. And then in the draft, in that first round, a trade back and then grab whatever cornerback is there in the late teens. Probably not Patrick Surtain or Caleb Farley. I think those guys will be gone, but maybe a J.C. Horn.
That's kind of what we've been talking about on the show for the last couple of weeks as well. It's just, it seems like that the Broncos' plan, veteran competition for Drew Lock and give him one more shot at it. And then, George Paton trying to build a war chest, trading back in that first round, trying to multiply picks. And, if the Lock thing doesn't work out, that gives you ammo in future years to kind of roll that capital forward and be able to pursue something. Do you think that that's a smart strategy, given where the Broncos are right now?
Yeah, it does make a lot of sense, especially for George Paton. Guys, I was told right after he was hired, don't be surprised if he kind of sits back and lets this year play out before making any major changes. Of course, with the coaching staff, we know that that's not going to change this year. Quarterback, that's a huge position. Cornerback, moving on from AJ, that's not a huge surprise there because that's not really a big decision and a huge move for the future. That's just a move for 2021, so that's not a surprise. We could see other moves with Jarrell Casey and other guys along those lines this year as well. But for the big moves, I wouldn't be surprised if that all waits until next year and we get George Paton gets to see a true evaluation of Vic Fangio for himself. He gets to see Drew Lock and a big evaluation for himself because if George Paton goes out there and uses that 9th overall pick on a quarterback, that's a huge commitment for him right there, and he may need more time because remember, guys, most other general managers around the league have 12 months to prepare for this coming draft. George Paton, as the general manager of the Broncos, is only having 4 months, so he may not want to pull a trigger on a big quarterback there, especially with what's going on this year with COVID, with not getting a full evaluation of all of these quarterbacks, and then on top of that, not getting to see these guys at the combine, not get to talk to them in person. So it may just really be a wait-and-see year. And it also gives Drew Lock one more year to prove people wrong and to show that he can be the guy.
Do you think that these hot take guys that say that George Paton needs to make a splash or whatever, do you agree with that?
No, I don't agree with that. In fact, I don't think that George Paton is looking to make splashes in order to make people happy. I think his approach of being aggressive but not reckless is huge. And look, we saw it with Matthew Stafford. They checked in, being aggressive about potentially upgrading a quarterback situation. They may check in on other quarterbacks as well, but he's not going to be reckless, especially when he has a 6-year deal. And this is year 1. And the expectations for him, I know some people may have some unrealistic expectations about turning this thing around right away. He knows that within the organization, within himself, that the expectations aren't to turn it around in year 1, guys. He's given a 6-year contract so he can do it right. So I do not believe that George Paton believes he needs to make a big move, and I don't expect him to force anything in terms of a big move this year.
Zach, last one here for you. Really appreciate the time. Zach Stevens with DNVR joining us. One of the things that I hear a lot, and I think a lot of people talk about is what can you learn from the team that just won the Super Bowl. So every year we do that. When you're a team that's out of it, you ask, okay, what can we learn? So you have the Tampa Bay Bucks and what they've done to assemble a Super Bowl roster. People want to go get the quarterback now. Do you think that now is the time to go get that quarterback, or do you think that this roster still needs building?
Man, as much as I want to say go get the quarterback, because, guys, I could preach for that all day. Go get the sexy quarterback in the draft or go make a huge trade for a veteran quarterback. I think this defense needs some work and attention this offseason. So here's what I see. Right now, I see the offense being very, very well built. It's just missing that quarterback piece. So get a quarterback in there, and this offense just this year can take off and can be a top 10 offense. And really, if they get a quarterback in here this year, or at least get average to above average quarterback play, this offense should be the thing that carries this team. But the defense is going to need some pieces to it. Cornerback, linebacker, and potentially defensive line as well. And that's what they could focus on in free agency in that draft, specifically that number 9 overall pick, whether it's 9, whether they trade back, can really help the defense. And then next year is when you have the offense that has all the pieces, and most of the pieces are going into year 3, year 4 of a veteran, more so offense. And then on defense, you have those pieces, and then you really are just missing the quarterback. And now whether you do that via trade, free agency, or go young with quarterback, then you really could take off. So I totally agree with you guys about what you can learn from Tampa Bay, and just plug in a really good quarterback and look what happens.